Breaking news. To the people I represent, Putin's puppets are sailing against the wind. To all my neighbors, the poor, dark, and confused have abandoned any pretense of neutrality and are now fully behind Russia's slaughter of Ukrainian civilians. A delegation from the continent even traveled to meet Russian leader Vladimir Putin to negotiate an end to the atrocities in Ukraine that began in February of last year. Many African countries have taken a neutral stance. South Africa, the economic powerhouse of the African continent and a member of the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, economic grouping with Russia, has hesitated to support Putin's decision to annihilate Ukraine. But Ngwina, who has publicly declared his support for the Russian strongman despite a worldwide arrest warrant for him due to his involvement in an attack on an Eastern European country, has no such qualms. Munipenga. Lacoste's leader has thrown caution to the wind by publicly supporting Putin's aggressive policies, which have appalled nearly every country on earth. This comes after Putin promised free grain to the country at a recent summit he hosted with African leaders in St. Petersburg, and after helicopters were delivered from Europe. Putin and Ngwina, both dictator loyalists, share a common belief in locking up political opponents like Alexei Navalny in Russia and Job Sikala, a senior official in the Citizens' Coalition for Change in South Africa. Both dictators have no qualms about using violence to put down democratic demonstrations. In August 2018 and January 2019, at least a dozen people were killed by Ngwina's soldiers. The public's backing of Russia's invasion of Ukraine is further proof that Ngwina is the most tone-deaf person alive. Our leaders have been exposed as Russian puppets. They're making serious efforts to make Zimbabwe a client state of Moscow in exchange for favors like used helicopters. Munipenga. The Lacoste leader has been campaigning across the country for another 5 years in power so that his failed policies can continue to deepen poverty. Although many supporters have shown up to the rallies, this is not because they are fans of the octogenarian leader. Ngwina's intimidating goons armed with attendance registers have coerced most of the populace into attending. Most of the people who show up to hear the Lacoste leader speak are probably bored to tears and would rather watch paint dry. I don't know what's worse for the poor people. Having to stand in the hot sun for hours to hear a speech by Ngwina that will undoubtedly be bland and characterized by empty promises, or having to listen to the entire insufferable monologue by the Lacoste leader, which can be best described as repetitive dross. The worst part is when they have to stand in line for bread and there are fights breaking out as people try to grab loaves from the air. This is not only dehumanizing, but it also shows how little respect their elected officials have for them. The attack on those who attended a rally addressed by CCC leader Nero in Nyanga and the callous murder of a CCC supporter in Glen Norah, Harare are the latest in a disgraceful orgy of violence against the Citizens' Coalition for Change supporters by ZANU-PF thugs. These heinous acts are unmistakable proof that the Lacoste regime is nervous about losing the upcoming election on August 23 despite its boasts of an easy victory. Ngwina's cabal has only delivered on 16 of 238 promises made in 2018, or a meager 7%, according to a report, so it's clear that the regime, which came to power via a military onslaught, is now resorting to the tried and true method of scaring voters: the use of knobkerries and other weapons. After all, in February of last year, Generari promised at a rally that his party would crush the CCC like lice. Despite subsequent calls for peace, we are now witnessing the manifestation of this threat. My fellow Zimbabweans, I know you are now deeply regretting your participation in the coup celebration that led to the untimely demise of Gushungo, whose insight was sorely missed. After a high court ruling disqualified the CCC candidates in Bulawayo from running for office because they submitted their nomination papers after the 4 p.m. deadline, I am relieved to learn that they will be able to run in the elections after all. I can't help but think the High Court ruling wasn't upheld because if it had, Some high-ranking ZANU-PF politicians would have faced the same fate for filing their nomination papers late. The disqualification of the ZANU-PF candidates would be a major setback for the Lacoste cabal KKKK. Hopefully the members of the CCC have learned from this scare to file their nomination papers well in advance of the deadline and not rush into the nomination courts at the last minute.